Hip adduction is one of the most undertrained ranges of motion of the body that I see predominantly when it comes to hip mobility and how the hips function. Now, hip adduction is when the leg moves across the body like this. But from a closed kinetic chain perspective, it can also mean this, with the legs situated on the ground. As I side bend to the right, my pelvis has to move left relative to the foot. So this places the hip in more adduction. Alternatively, if I do that same side bend, now this hip is placed in a relative hip abduction. If this hip was to move inward relative to the foot, okay, it's more of an abduction. When we're looking at hip adduction, we want to see at least 25 degrees range of motion if we were measuring this on a table. Now, most often, if I find people who are limited in their ability to create hip adduction, they're most often limited in hip flexion as well. The adductors are very undertrained muscles. Now, we spend a lot of time stretching the adductors, okay, with some Cossack squats, frog stretches, horse stance, all good stuff to release some guarding in the adductors, but we also need to train them in their shortened ranges. So the ability for them to produce adduction across the midline transfers significantly well to actually improving some hip internal rotation and some hip flexion. So performing some adduction exercises is something I've been doing a lot lately before doing some weighted squatting, and it makes my hips feel super good. So I'm going to show you two of my favorite exercises to improve your ability to adduct the hip. The first exercise is going to be an adductor strengthening exercise in its most shortened range of motion, which would be a lengthened position for some of the lateral hip muscles. And then we're going to do an exercise to actually lengthen these muscles under load, the lateral hip muscles that produce abduction. And when we stretch them, they move into adduction. So let's get into the exercises. Okay, this is a hip adduction overcoming isometric plus lift off. So we're going to start in side lying with a heavy weight on the top of the foot, on the bottom foot. Now we want to choose a weight that's heavy enough to where we can't actively lift the foot off the ground. So this is an overcoming isometric where we're working on firing as much motor units to the contractile tissues at this shortened range of motion where the muscles aren't used to firing. And this will not only help reflexively relax the lengthening side muscles, the ones that are under stretch, but it will also help improve that end range or short range strength of these adductors in particular. So I'm going to start on my side with my hips pushed forward, and we're going to attempt to posterior pelvic tilt. We want a straight line between the ankle, the hip, and the shoulder here. So now I'm going to drive up as hard as I can into the plate for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to relax. I'm going to try to push myself upright just a little bit more. Keep that pelvis posterior tilted. Drive up into the plate. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All it takes is around 5 to 10 seconds with these overcoming isometrics. And then I'm going to push myself up into my max stretch. Push that hip forward and push, push, push. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now we always want to build up to our max stretch position. We don't want to just start here because the muscles aren't primed to work in that shortened position. Now, after the third rep, I'm going to remove the plate. And now I'm going to back off to a range that I know I can lift. And I'm going to lift as high as I can. 1, 2, 3, and down. 1, 2, 3, and down. If I notice I'm lifting too high, I can come up with my torso just a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, down. 1, 2, 3, down. 1, 2, 3. Maybe I'll hold the last rep here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you could do a test here. Before you even do the overcoming isometrics, you can test a lift off. See how high you get. Try the overcoming isometrics. Notice how much higher you get. You might get an extra 10 to 15 degrees higher there. and you didn't even do any stretching prior. So this is a really good way to, again, fire up those motor units in the shortening side muscles to create more of a range of motion effect in the lengthening muscles. Okay, the next exercise is one to drive some load into some of the lengthening tissues. So as I push my hip out to the side in a closed chain fashion, this is adduction, relative adduction of the femur, okay? Now when I do this, I feel a good lengthening sensation in these lateral hip tissues, predominantly the glute med and min. So we're gonna work on loading this using the wall for reference. So I'm gonna show you from the back here. I'll work on my left side. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna have light hand support on the wall. I'm going to take this leg, move it across, and then try to hinge my torso toward the right. As I hinge my torso toward the right, the hip is going to shoot out to the side. What I don't want to see happen is my torso completely turns out. I want to keep my torso facing the wall as much as we can. That's why we're using the wall here for reference. I could keep a slight knee bend, and then I'm going to maximally hinge here, and then I'm going to hold this isometrically, making sure I'm keeping tension through the inner part of my foot arch, okay? I don't want to just roll out onto the outside edge of my foot. So I'm actively driving my foot down into the ground, trying to get light with my fingertip support on the wall, but I'm still using my fingers to hold me in a position where my torso is facing the wall. So I can hold this isometrically, really getting light, or I can kind of move back and forth for these pulsing style reps, okay? And we should feel a lot of length and load through these outside hip tissues, okay? It's almost similar to a pigeon stretch, it's just way more localized, okay? So do both sides, see which one is more difficult to create that length. If you do have a very limited hip internal rotation, you might notice you have to kind of sit in the stretch for a little bit longer, maybe kind of pulse in and out of it before you actually feel some good stretch on this side, but don't just write it off if you're not feeling that lengthening right away. You kind of have to sit in it for a bit. Okay, so as we hinge, the more we hinge laterally, the more we're gonna have to push that hip out into that adduction. We can squat into it in this position as well. Oof, lots of options there. So after we perform both of these exercises, we superset them for about 2 to 3 rounds, and we can retest our ability to adduct. Now I know at the start of the video I demonstrated some adduction, and already this feels much looser. And we can even test out our squat, see how that feels. Oftentimes you'll be able to squat full range with a little bit less pinchy hips, and you might be able to squat with more straight feet. And I can tell you right now, my squat feels so nice. So for using this drill for isometrics, I like to build clients up to around 45 to 60 seconds. And then we can also do active or dynamic reps in and out of the position, anywhere from 10 to 15 reps. If we're doing more pulsing style, we can go higher reps, even 20 reps. And then I like to finish with a hold in that end range position. So anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds there, really getting that time under tension and length through those lateral hip tissues. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed some of these exercises and you're gonna give them a try, let me know in the comments. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want a more comprehensive program to achieve your flexibility goals, reach out for one-on-one coaching, or you can opt to pick up my Supple Hips program on my website, where it's a full loaded stretching program for every range of motion the hip goes through. In the meantime, try out these exercises and let me know what you think.